Here is the story of two high school sweethearts whose wildest dreams have come true.
In this case, a one-time high school football star can meet the cheerleader and grow up and raise a happy family all together.
But someone is about to tear this family apart.
Very beautiful young lady, kind of referred to as a hard-body 18-year-old.
You bring an attractive young woman into your home, you are asking for trouble.
And it isn't long before jealousy, greed, and revenge lead to murder.
It's unfortunate such a heinous event ripped their family apart.
This was not a murder of passion. This was cold-blooded murder.
They say you never know the worth of water till the well runs dry. But that's not a problem the residents of Lake Asbury, Florida, ever seem to have. 30 miles south of Jacksonville, this little hamlet feels like heaven on earth.
It really reminds me of the 1950s American town where everybody knows each other and life is good.
But it won't be long before Lake Asbury is stained with blood. Just a few hundred yards from the lakeshore live the Joneses, a family with an impeccable reputation. On most days, the local car lot is where you'll find patriarch Jack. He makes his money, a lot of it, as a manager at the dealership.
Jack had a very good reputation at the car dealership. He was very successful.
Jack Jones was a very friendly man. He always would smile and wave when we would drive into our driveway.
He's a wonderful neighbor. And a great dad, too.
Jack was a very solid example of a work ethic to pass on to his children, Jill and Shane. It's pretty much a good example of being a role model father.
And one of his apples hasn't fallen far from the tree. Jill is the elder daughter, and she has taken after Jack since she was just a toddler.
She was kind of like the apple of his eye.
Jill is happiest when she makes her father proud, whether it was getting good grades in school or closing the big deal.
They had a lot of the same likes. When Jack was out in the yard, Jill would be out there too.
They also share the same killer instinct.
Jill seemed to be really happy when she was out doing things with him.
Her friendly demeanor clearly comes from her father. But don't be fooled. This congenial car salesman is very protective. Though he tries not to play favorites, Jack and Jill share a special bond. And that's just fine with the other two family members. Wife Linda and younger daughter Shane have always been two peas in a pod.
Shane was more of a replica of Linda. She favored her mother and tended to do things more like her mother would do.
Linda's a successful career woman, working full-time as an accountant. Today, Shane is looking at a gift her mother bought for a new coworker. The flashy show of affection she learned from Jack.
When they started accumulating money, Jack really liked to spoil Linda, and he bought her lots of rings so she could have a diamond on every finger.
Yes, the Joneses are enjoying the fruits of their labor. But who could guess? this family's fortunes would soon take a turn for the worse. The problems began shortly after Jill and Shane moved out on their own.
The empty nest syndrome can be very daunting to a family after raising and caring for whether it's 1 or 9 children.
Linda Jones probably felt lost. She felt empty. She felt she didn't have a direction in her life.
The Jones home was very quiet, not much action going on.
To make up for the loneliness, Linda hatched a plan involving an intern from her office. The young woman's name is Carrie Davis. Today is her 1-month anniversary of living with her boss.
Carrie had no place to live. She didn't have enough money to live on. Linda was feeling the empty nest syndrome.
Lonely Linda killed 2 birds with 1 stone. And now Carrie is a permanent resident.
It was a match made in heaven.
The two quickly became more than just boss and employee.
Linda was like a mother to her.
Carrie is now the target of all Linda's affection.
She bought her clothes, she took care of her, and she looked upon her like a daughter.
Friday night family dinners now include the perky 5th wheel, much to the daughter's chagrin.
They felt jealous about her. It was as if they had another sister that had become the favorite.
But Jack is glad Linda has a new friend. Maybe a little too glad.
Jill realized that Carrie Davis was coming on to her father, and at the same time, she may have realized that their father was also responding.
Jill does her best to keep her father's attention focused squarely on the family. But Jack doesn't want to be rude to his new roomie, and instead tries to brush aside the concerns and focus on the finer things in life. Because all work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. What started as a cordial evening is about to come undone. Linda discovers her daughters are right.
I think Linda saw Carrie's flirtatiousness with Jack and vice versa.
Here is a young girl that she has done everything for, and then she goes and starts flirting with her husband.
Jack plays innocent. But Linda knows better and reveals to the whole table that earlier in the marriage, when their daughters were just little girls, Jack had an affair. Shane and Jill are stunned.
When they found out what was going on with their dad, they must have had some anger.
But Jack strikes back and reveals that Linda was also caught with her pants down.
There's been some infidelity with Linda in her relationship with her boss.
They both had had affairs earlier in their married lives, and they felt that they could repair it.
I would observe Linda coming home every day at lunchtime with a gentleman I found out was not her husband, it was her boss. And I observed this pretty much every single day during the summer while I was off. So that part of living next door to the Jones family was a little bit disturbing because I didn't think that that was really appropriate.
Both spouses have cheated on each other. And it seems like Jack never really confronted Linda about it. And instead, maybe revenge came into play, and that's where Carrie Davis ended up being the pawn. In any family, when both spouses end up having an affair, the American dream just comes and crashes down all around you.
Jill and Shane would feel anger towards their parents for having done that, for having betrayed not only each other, but betrayed their daughters in having this relationship. They probably were very angry with them.
But now, old wounds have been ripped open, threatening to poison the whole family. Soon, each member of this once happy household will have to watch their back as resentment leads to a deadly outburst. Coming up, more proof that nothing is certain in life except death and taxes. On the banks of Florida's Lake Asbury, the Jones family is spinning apart, all because of their new house guest, Carrie Davis. Linda feels that husband Jack's wandering eye has returned.
Anytime you bring a very attractive young woman into your home, you are asking for trouble. And that's what Linda got.
Of course, Carrie doesn't see what the fuss is all about. Linda threatens to boot the beauty to the curb, but the nonchalant nubile knows Big Daddy Jack's got her back.
She may have felt really, really abandoned, and Linda probably felt she had no one to turn to.
Over the next few days, Carrie puts her gratitude for Jack on display for all to see.
Something's going on there that shouldn't be going on.
A boost in self-esteem is one thing, but every man needs discretion.
And Jack has none. But Linda didn't become a successful accountant by being played for a fool.
Carrie, this is my family. I see what you're doing with Jack.
She was there because Linda was being good to her,
I'm not having it.
and she pays Linda back by flirting with her husband.
And Linda's worst nightmare is about to come true. Jack admits he and Carrie are having an affair.
It was the two people that she loved most in the world, and they betrayed her.
You need to pack your bags, please.
Linda tells the intern to get out. Jack now faces serious fallout from his family.
Dads are put up here on the pedestal, and rightly so. And now Dad has kind of fallen off that pedestal.
And fallen hard, especially for Jill, who's watched the whole thing unfold.
Carrie got an apartment very near where Linda and Jack live.
The teen is barely settled in before she senses she might not be alone.
This probably gave Carrie all sorts of nightmares.
The lurker's persistent prowling is chilling. And soon, the danger becomes very real.
The brake lines to Carrie's vehicle had been cut.
This could have led to Carrie's death. Carrie saved herself by calling the police, and they found the cut brake lines before she drove the car.
Karma or something else? There is a line of Jones women who could all be suspects. But Carrie isn't the only one who has endured an unwelcomed visitor.
Linda is reporting someone broke into the house and has stolen items, jewelry, a television. There are some items that she had reported missing.
The home invasion leaves Linda's sense of safety in shambles. Linda hasn't spoken to former intern Carrie in weeks. So neither knows just how much they now have in common, or how much worse it's about to get. Walking home from work, Linda is brutally attacked.
He drug her over to an area that was a dirt mound and had duct taped her hands.
Linda struggles, but is overpowered and raped. Detectives review the evidence from the attack.
The police take a rape kit and they find that there is semen.
But the DNA doesn't match anyone in the system. Back home, poor Linda, battered and bruised, draws support and comfort from younger daughter Shane, as well as elder daughter Jill.
The Jones daughters were in denial. Why is this happening? Who is this person?
There are no words for how much pain has fallen on their doorstep. But who could have known even more violence was headed their way?
Sheriff's Office 911. He wants to rescue. I've got blood. Man.
Can you tell me what happened?
Man, pregnant man, and made us and robbed us.
Coming up, the Jones family's best days are in the rearview mirror. What lies ahead will tear this family apart for good. On the evening of November 7th, horror comes to Little Lake Asbury.
I have my officers. They're turning on the Lake Asbury now, okay? I don't think he's breathing. Okay, I'll be there in just a few minutes.
The caller is Linda Jones.
Police walk into the residence through the front door.
While one officer stays with Linda, his partner makes a horrific discovery.
Jack Jones is lying on the floor, his hands duct taped above his head.
The officer immediately goes to him and checks to see if there's any pulse, but Jack was already dead when the officer got there.
I walk into the residence. I see Jack lying on the floor, covered in blood. At that point, first thing to do is to do a quick look through. It was apparent that Linda was in shock. That's vitally important to interview her.
As the story goes, Linda Jones was preparing dinner.
Jack came home through the kitchen, came home the normal time.
And two masked men come in the front door.
Jack was ambushed. It was a surprise.
As a third assailant enters the back door, the band of thugs goes to town on Linda's husband.
Jack was very brutally beaten with a club.
It was a very violent attack.
After he had fallen and was already unconscious, they tied him up with duct tape.
Jack is rendered helpless.
The intruders then turn their sights to Linda.
Linda was knocked over. She was then tied up with duct tape.
She could hear them rummaging for loot. And then they were gone.
Linda manages to remove the duct tape, wiggle out of it, and then calls 911.
Detectives have a picture of what happened. Now they turn to why and begin processing the scene for clues. They focus on the duct tape used to restrain Jack and Linda.
There was duct tape found in various areas of the house. Jack Jones is lying on the floor with his hands duct taped above his head, his feet are duct taped. I personally used to trap wild hogs. One of the ways that I could contain a wild hog was I duct tape their snout, their front legs together, their back legs together, rendering them helpless. Jack was basically rendered helpless. You can't move with that duct tape when it's tight. You got to cut it off. There's no other way to get it off.
Whoever was here may have slipped up.
The key evidence was the duct tape around Jack's hands. We find on the duct tape a fingerprint.
And that's not the only trace the killers left behind.
We did find bloody footprints leading down the hallway.
The bloody trail leads to the upstairs bedroom, where they find something else amiss.
Investigators found that there was jewelry missing from a bedroom, so they did determine it was a burglary.
But somehow, this one escalated all the way to brazen murder.
We bring in multiple detectives to knock on doors, to ask questions, to find out anything and everything that happened within a reasonable amount of time.
Clearly, someone has it out for the Joneses. And with a killer out there, no one in the family feels safe.
Police are not sure who's next. Could it be Jill? Shane? Will they come back for Linda? There's a killer loose.
Neighbors tell police that someone else, a former house guest, may also be at risk. As day turns to night, detectives quickly arrive at the home of terrified teen Carrie Davis.
The police come to the house. They're worried about her.
Carrie is safe and sound. But the news of her lover's death leaves her devastated.
She has all these questions, all these fears swirling around in her head.
Detectives then meet with the Jones girls to offer caution and support.
Jill and Shane knew that their father had been killed, their mother had been injured by the intruders. Now they probably had fears for themselves as well.
But their dad a victim? Jill says it just doesn't make sense. Jack was more than capable of defending himself.
Jack was very interested in firearms, and he carried a gun with him at all times.
Maybe he was just slow on the draw? Detectives are stumped. The gun isn't found on any evidence list.
Jack's gun was missing, and the police really couldn't put their finger on why. Because he was not shot with the gun.
Maybe the killers wanted Jack Jones to suffer. But why? Could it all connect back to the attacks on his wife and mistress?
It would be very unusual for Carrie and Linda to receive similar threats unless they were from the same person.
To investigators, it can't be a coincidence, which means the culprit has to be someone close to home.
Anytime law enforcement thinks that a case has an inside involvement, everyone becomes a suspect. They have to leave no stone unturned.
Carrie is interviewed after the murder and admits that she had an affair with Jack.
But it wasn't just about sex, the teen protests. Jack had genuine feelings.
He was thinking with romance and love, and possibly how this young woman made him feel younger as well. Carrie Davis blurred Jack's lines of reality.
So much so, Jack proposes without ever telling his wife.
Jack has bought an engagement ring for Carrie Davis.
And though she's been kicked out of the Jones home, Jack continues to provide a roof over her head.
Jack rents Carrie an apartment in Jacksonville, not far from where he works.
You have people seeing Jack driving to the apartment. That's going to open up a lot more opportunities for gossip and for whispering.
They know they're playing with fire.
He continued to live at home, but in the mornings and evening he would spend with Carrie.
Linda is still operating in the dark, convinced Jack and Carrie are through, until she makes an alarming discovery.
Linda ends up finding out Jack Jones is paying for Carrie Davis's apartment while she's going through their credit card statements.
It's hard to separate being sad from being angry, from being resentful.
That's when Linda confronts her husband.
And you tell me it was over.
And he comes clean.
He tells her they're having an affair and he's going to marry Carrie.
The news doesn't go over well.
Linda was overwhelmed. She is angry, she is devastated.
Surely she now has motive for getting rid of Jack.
Linda's head is really in a different place. She was raped. She already feels like a victim because she's been cheated on by her husband.
But the matriarch may not be the only one harboring resentment. The Jones girls are also aware of their father's affair. Had one of them masterminded this entire plot?
Your dad is having an affair with somebody other than your mom, and especially somebody your own age that's maybe your peer. The embarrassment and the shame must have been really difficult for these girls.
The Jones daughters have a motive for murder. They had been hurt.
And both of them had a burning resentment for Carrie. After all, she'd stolen both their father's affections and their mother's.
She moved her into her home. She bought her clothes.
Probably had a negative impact on the relationship between Jill and Shane and their mother.
But without evidence, detectives can't build a case against anyone. Days tick by without answers.
For the investigators, time is always crucial, and in this case, it's no different.
At this point, I've got a dead body. I've got duct tape. I got blood evidence. Everybody's a suspect in a homicide.
But who's actually behind this one? Did Jill, Daddy's favorite, lash out in a deadly way? Perhaps Shane, Mommy's best friend, made sure her father paid for his infidelity. Is Linda playing everyone for a fool after masterminding a long con with a bloody finale? Or was Mistress Carrie Davis more of a monster than anyone ever expected? Up next, a hot new lead and a sinister plot starting to unravel. Days after the murder of philandering Jack Jones, police in Lake Asbury, Florida, are no closer to solving the case. Until they dig back into their notes and find a buried clue.
In this situation, a neighbor made a very important observation. The night of the murder, he was standing in his front yard and observed a maroon van leave Jack's residence at a high rate of speed.
The neighbor didn't get a license plate. But that doesn't mean police can't go looking for likely culprits.
I start running something called an auto track. Those auto tracks show me all associations. Anybody that Linda Jones, Jack Jones, they had dealings with.
And sure enough, there's a hit.
One of Linda's clients owned a maroon van.
His name is Donald Bradley. Now, to figure out if he was the one at the house that fateful evening.
I'm tracking phone calls. I subpoenaed phone call records.
Linda's cell phone record shows that she and Donald Bradley talked at least 3 times that night.
Investigators pay Bradley a visit.
Bradley admits that he was supposed to go over to the house that night, Linda's house, and pick up his tax papers.
Bradley claims he didn't know Jack, but has seen him around town. The story is convincing, but detectives want to get a look at his van, which turns out to be one of the cleanest vehicles police have ever seen.
The van had been detailed about 5 times since the incident.
He said he needs to keep it clean for his landscaping business.
Bradley puts himself at the Jones house, but with good reason. And there's not a single shred of evidence tying him to the murder. At least, not yet. The case languishes for days until Bradley's name pops up again.
A road rage incident occurred where Donald Bradley had got out of his van and struck a guy.
Riding with Bradley at the time was one of his landscaping employees, Brian McWhite. And wouldn't you know it, this McWhite has a record. Detectives throw a Hail Mary and compare his fingerprints to the one found at the crime scene.
Florida Department of Law Enforcement positively identified the 7th finger of Brian McWhite. It's on the duct tape. They said it could only be left by the perpetrator.
So Brian McWhite is brought down to the police station, and then he showed a picture of the print, and he denies any involvement in it at all.
Likely story. But police know there were multiple intruders. So they talk to the person closest to Brian McWhite, his brother Patrick, and strike gold.
Patrick McWhite tells police that he and his brother Brian witnessed the killing of Jack Jones.
We then go back to Brian, and of course now he is no longer denying it. He admits what happened and told us about it.
The McWhite brothers say Donald Bradley was the one who murdered Jack Jones. And they say he did it at the request of none other than Linda Jones.
Brian gets a call from Donald Bradley and says, I've got a job to do. This guy has been having an affair on his wife, and I want to go beat him up and teach him a lesson. Can you get your brother to come along with us?
The answer was yes. The brothers grab masks, gloves, and a Zulu war club. Bradley picks them up, and they drive to the Jones house and wait.
Jack came home the normal time and lays a gun down on the island.
That's when the McWhite brothers move in.
Donald goes in the back door so that he can get control of the gun.
Jack is bound. And to make the attack look like a robbery, Linda is also taped up, just a little looser.
The intruders went in the back bedroom, took some jewelry.
In the kitchen, Donald Bradley prepares to kill Jack with his own gun. But there's a problem.
There wasn't a chambered round in the pistol, so it never discharged.
Guns can be used in different ways, however.
Jack was struck in the face with his own firearm.
It's far more than the McWhite brothers had bargained for.
It frightened Brian so bad that Brian ultimately takes his gloves off, and that's how the fingerprint is left there.
With Jack dying on the floor, Donald Bradley cuts Linda free so she can call 911.
After the murder, Bradley drove McWhite's to his house. He told them to take off their clothes, and they burned all their clothes.
Police arrest Donald Bradley and confront him with the McWhite's testimony.
So the handwriting is on the wall now. Donald Bradley admits to police that he killed Jack Jones.
Bradley was just a hired gun.
Donald Bradley was in it for money. He was going to share some insurance policy money that Linda had told him she had taken out on Jack.
According to Bradley, Linda also masterminded the robberies in her own home, arranged to have Carrie tormented, and even stooped so low as to fake her own rape.
Linda paid an individual to have sex with her so that she would have physical evidence.
Linda should have gone and gotten a good divorce attorney. She should have taken him for all she could.
Instead, she sought bloody revenge.
Excuse me.
Linda's ultimately charged with first-degree premeditated murder of her husband.
Do not touch me.
I don't put you in jail unless you're ready to go to prison. So I felt 100% confident that all the evidence that was obtained and everything that went into this case was 100% accurate.
Are you serious?
Linda Jones goes to trial and is found guilty. The matriarch of a once blissful family is sentenced to life in prison. Donald Bradley is sentenced to death. The McWhite brothers get 10.5 years each. Older daughter Jill, younger daughter Shane, as well as Jack's mistress Carrie Davis, had nothing to do with the crime. In the end, a jealous wife and a cheating husband leaves the Jones family in tatters.
It's definitely a crime of passion, but it's also something that could have been easily avoided.
You know, Jack should have known better.
Claremont did not look like the sort of place where fears should have been able to settle. It was polished, well-lit, prosperous in the way some suburbs seem to hold themselves upright even after midnight, with clean shopfront glass, quiet trees, and the lingering perfume of restaurants after the last plates had been cleared away. On weekend nights, young people moved through its streets in soft waves, spilling out of bars and clubs in bright dresses, dark jackets, high heels clicking over pavement still warm from the day. Laughter rose in quick bursts, then faded. Taxi lights passed and disappeared. Music throbbed behind closed doors. Nothing about the scene announced the shape of what was coming. Nothing warned that this pleasant pocket of Perth, Western Australia, would become the center of one of the state's biggest and longest-running murder investigations after 3 young women vanished from the same nightlife district between January 1996 and March 1997. Wikipedia 1. The danger in Claremont did not arrive wearing a monstrous face. It did not stride out of shadows with theatrical violence. It moved in smaller ways than that, quieter ways, patient ways. It lived in the gap between a friend saying goodnight and a taxi arriving. It lived in the ordinary decision to leave a club a little early, to wait on a street corner for a ride home, to trust the wrong voice in the wrong moment. That was what made the horror feel so intimate when it finally settled over the city. These were not disappearances wrapped in mystery from some distant road or isolated scrubland. They began in public, in familiar places, near bars people knew, near streets parents had driven down, near suburbs associated with comfort and money and safety. Then suddenly, that safety began to look like a painted backdrop, something thin enough to tear with one hand. Wikipedia won in the beginning, before the name of the case hardened into history, before detectives and courtrooms and headlines stretched the story across decades. There was only an ease. A young woman leaves a nightclub. She calls for a taxi. She is seen waiting. The taxi arrives, and she is gone. It is such a small sequence of events on paper that it almost resists its own terror. 3 minutes, a phone booth, a patch of curb, a figure alone under the night sky. That was all it took for the first crack to open. On the 27th of January 1996, 18-year-old Sarah Spires disappeared after leaving Club Bayview in Claremont. She called Swan Taxis from a public telephone at about 2:06 a.m., and witnesses later placed her waiting near the corner of Sterling Road and Sterling Highway. But by the time the taxi arrived around 2:09 a.m., she was no longer there. Her remains have never been found. Wikipedia won. A city can convince itself of many things after the first disappearance. It can call the absence temporary. It can tell itself there is a misunderstanding somewhere, a miscommunication, an unseen detour. Perhaps she caught another ride. Perhaps she went home another way. Perhaps by morning there will be some embarrassed explanation, some tired apology, some simple reason that makes the tension dissolve. Families cling to these possibilities because the alternative enters the room like winter. Friends replay final conversations and search them for hidden meanings that were never there. Parents sit awake listening for a car in the driveway, for footsteps at the door, for a key turning in the lock. The world does not yet feel permanently broken then. It only feels wrong, and everyone waits for wrongness to correct itself. But sometimes morning comes and the silence is still there, unchanged, and the first terrible lesson begins. Missing can become something far darker than late. That was the lesson Perth started learning in 1996, though it did not yet know how much more it would be forced to absorb. Wikipedia won. Claremont at night kept operating, because cities do. Glasses were washed, neon signs hummed, doors opened to lines of young patrons dressed for music and flirtation, and the private urgency of being young enough to believe the night belongs to you. The clubs and bars in that district had become part of a recognizable ritual. Friends gathered there, split up there, found one another again there. Women stood outside in groups or alone for a moment, arms folded against the cold, scanning for rides, sharing cigarettes, brushing hair back from their faces while headlights moved across them and away. To most people, danger still had the wrong costume. It was supposed to be obvious, loud, disordered. It was not supposed to blend into traffic. It was not supposed to understand routine. But predatory violence often studies routine more carefully than anyone else in the room. It learns the flow of streets, the thinning of crowds after closing, the habits of women traveling home, the little islands of vulnerability that form between nightlife and daylight. In retrospect, places begin to seem arranged for the predator's convenience. The curbside spaces, the brief moments of isolation, the trust extended to a helpful stranger or a car slowing at just the right time. In real time, those same places look ordinary. That is why ordinary places can become the most haunting of all. The Claremont case came to embody exactly that contradiction. Familiar streets becoming the stage for something almost impossible to accept. Wikipedia won. Then the pattern deepened. A second young woman vanished from the same area months later. Her name was Jane Rimmer. She was 23. She had also been out socializing in Claremont before she disappeared in the early hours of the 9th of June 1996. By then, coincidence had started to look less like coincidence and more like the outline of a method. When one young woman disappears from a nightlife district, a community may grieve and worry. When another disappears from the same district under similar circumstances, the whole emotional weather changes. Fear becomes organized. Parents start offering lifts where they once offered advice. Friends stop pretending that inconvenience matters. Women alter routes, change plans, wait together longer than they used to. Every dark car at the curb acquires a second meaning. Every delayed arrival sends a little electric shock through the people waiting at home. Police formed a special task force known as Macro after the disappearance of Rimmer, and after the third disappearance they publicly confirmed they were hunting a serial killer. Wikipedia won, but that confirmation came only after another woman vanished. On the 14th of March 1997, 27-year-old Chura Glennon disappeared after a night out in Claremont. Like the others, she had been in the same entertainment district. Like the others, she did not make it home. By then the district's name had changed in the public imagination. It was no longer only a suburb. It was a warning. It was shorthand for vulnerability, for unanswered questions, for a predator who seemed to understand exactly how to exploit the fragile minutes after midnight. Two of the women, Jane Rimmer and Chura Glennon, were later found murdered. Sarah Spires remains missing and is presumed dead. The killings gripped Western Australia for decades and profoundly traumatized families, friends, investigators, and the wider community. Wikipedia wanted to understand why the case lodged itself so deeply into public memory. It is not enough to recite dates and names. You have to enter the atmosphere that formed around them. You have to imagine a city listening differently to its own nights. Imagine the parking lots after midnight, where people paused longer before getting into their cars. Imagine mothers watching the clock with a kind of concentration that hurt. Imagine young women in club bathrooms talking in low tones, making new rules for themselves, promising not to leave alone. Then discovering how easy it still was for a group to break apart one ordinary goodbye at a time. Fear did not arrive in a single scream, it accumulated. It spread through newspaper headlines and television reports, through whispered conversations in kitchens, through taxi queues and university campuses and office lunchrooms. It entered homes where daughters had never before had to phone in each step of the journey back. It changed how people thought about safety because it suggested something more unsettling than random violence. It suggested observation, selection, repetition. A human being moving through the same world as everyone else, watching, waiting, then acting with terrible confidence in those narrow windows when someone was alone. Wikipedia won. The hook of this story, if there must be one, is not merely that a killer stalked a wealthy nightlife district. It is that he seemed to exploit the most ordinary transition in a young person's evening, the trip home. There is something especially cruel about that threshold. The fun is over, but the danger has not announced itself. The body is tired, the attention softened by music and alcohol and conversation. A person is no longer fully inside the shelter of the crowd, but not yet within the safety of home. It is a thin strip of time, easy to overlook, and that is precisely why it can be fatal. In the Claremont case, that threshold became a hunting ground. Later, prosecutors would allege that Bradley Robert Edwards was responsible for the murders of Jane Rimmer and Chura Glennon. In 2020, he was convicted of those two murders and found not guilty of the murder of Sarah Spires. In December 2020, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 40 years. Wikipedia won, yet even with a conviction, the emotional architecture of the case remains jagged. Sarah Spires has never been found. That absence is more than evidentiary, it is spiritual. It leaves a door open in the worst possible way for families. The missing do not rest in the same manner as the dead whose bodies are recovered. Their last moments remain suspended. Their location remains unknown. The earth has not returned them. The rituals that help grief take shape are interrupted or denied. In such cases, hope and dread become twisted together so tightly that neither can be cleanly separated. A family can know what the world believes and still feel the ache of unfinished waiting. That is one of the quiet devastations surrounding Claremont. The case is famous for its scale, its longevity, and its forensic significance, but at its center are three women whose futures were broken off mid-sentence, and among them one who has never been brought home. Wikipedia 1. There is also the unsettling fact that the predator at the heart of the story did not emerge from some mythic darkness. He came from ordinary structures. He worked. He moved through the city without carrying a visible sign of what he was capable of. During the later trial, prosecutors relied in part on forensic evidence, witness testimony, and evidence connected to Telstra work vehicles, arguing that Edwards used company vehicles after hours and that fibers linked his vehicle to the murders of Rimmer and Glennon. The portrait that eventually formed in court was not of chaos, but of disturbing control. Wikipedia 1. That is part of what gives the Claremont case its enduring chill. The menace was not some explosion of rage in a visible alley. It was a hidden discipline. It may have looked like a man offering a ride. It may have sounded calm. It may have arrived under familiar headlights. The street would have looked almost the same a moment before and a moment after. Somewhere, music was still playing. Somewhere, glasses were still being stacked. Somewhere, friends were still laughing because they had no reason not to. And in those ordinary scenes, the story began writing itself in the dark. This is where our telling begins as well. Not at the courthouse, not with the verdict, not even with the discovery of bodies, but at the edge of a bright suburb after midnight, where the air cools, the crowd thins, and the distance between safety and catastrophe narrows to the time it takes for a taxi not to arrive soon enough. In that space stand three women at different moments in the same terrible pattern, and beyond them a whole city beginning to understand that evil does not always crash through the front door. Sometimes it pulls up quietly at the curb, waits for a woman to be alone, and leaves the street looking almost untouched. Wikipedia 1. Perth in the mid-1990s still carried itself with the easy confidence of a city that believed distance could protect it. It was beautiful in a clean, spacious way, edged by ocean light, widened by long roads, and buffered by the feeling that whatever truly dark things happened in the world tended to happen somewhere else, farther east, farther away, in cities whose names arrived more often in the headlines. Western Australia had its own crimes, its own sorrows, its own buried violence, but Perth's public self-image leaned toward order. It was a place of suburban lawns, family routines, and a sense of breathing room that mattered because, when terror finally took hold in Claremont, it did not only shatter lives. It shattered an idea. It forced a city that saw itself as open and safe to confront the fact that predatory evil had been moving through its own streets with chilling familiarity. The Claremont killings began with the disappearance of Sarah Spires on the 27th of January 1996, followed by the disappearance and murder of Jane Rimmer on the 9th of June 1996 and the disappearance and murder of Chura Glennon on the 14th of March 1997, all after nights out in Claremont's entertainment district. Wikipedia 1. To understand why those disappearances struck Perth so deeply, you have to understand what Claremont meant before it became a word spoken with dread. It was not some desolate fringe or forgotten stretch of road. It was an affluent western suburb, well-known, socially active, comfortable in its reputation. By day, it wore refinement easily. By night, especially on weekends, it brightened into one of the city's most fashionable social pockets. People came for bars, hotels, clubs, noise, flirtation, and the little rituals that belong to youth and freedom. Friends gathered there after dinner, after work, after parties elsewhere had thinned out, music spilled from venues, taxis rolled through. The pavement outside pubs and clubs became a temporary stage where friendships expanded and fractured and reformed over the course of a few hours. Someone would go to the bar, someone would dance, someone would decide to head home. The assumption beneath all of it was simple and powerful. This was normal life, and normal life would continue. ABC later described Claremont as an upmarket suburb whose disappearances changed Perth to its core, and that description captures the one precisely. The horror was intensified because the setting had already been coded in the public imagination as safe, prosperous, and familiar. ABC News too in that period, the city's nightlife moved with a rhythm that now feels almost painfully innocent. There were no rideshare apps glowing in a pocket, no constant location sharing, no frictionless stream of check-ins that could map a person's final movements to the minute. A night out ended the old way. You looked for your friends, you borrowed coins, you found a payphone. You waited for a taxi under streetlights that made everything appear more public, and therefore more secure than it really was. People trusted the visibility of the street. They trusted traffic. They trusted that being in a busy district meant danger would hesitate. But the Claremont case would expose how fragile that trust could be. It revealed the vulnerability hidden inside ordinary transitions, those narrow stretches of time when the crowd begins to thin, when one person leaves before the others, when a woman stands alone for just long enough to become visible to the wrong man. Sarah Spires' disappearance after a taxi call from a public phone booth would become one of the most haunting details of the entire case, precisely because it captured that vulnerability in its smallest and cruelest form. Wikipedia won the broader social mood of Perth made the shock even sharper. In the mid-1990s, Western Australia was not untouched by crime. But serial predation of this kind still felt like a nightmare imported from television rather than something that could root itself in the city's social heart. Perth's isolation had long contributed to its identity. The city often thought of itself not just as geographically distant, but as psychologically separate, as if miles of land and water could thin the darker currents that ran elsewhere. That illusion was never wholly true, but it was widely felt. So, when the disappearances in Claremont began to form a pattern, fear spread not only because women were vanishing, but because the pattern implied planning, repetition, and a perpetrator who was not merely opportunistic, but practiced. This was not a single rupture, it looked like a method. That realization changed the emotional temperature of the city. The air on every late-night pickup point seemed to cool. Parents began to wait awake longer. Friends became less casual about the last goodbye of the evening. Women, who had once accepted a brief walk alone as an annoyance, started seeing it as a gamble whose odds they could no longer trust. After Jane Rimmer disappeared in similar circumstances, police created Task Force Macro to investigate the connected cases. And after Chura Glennon vanished, they publicly confirmed they were looking for a serial killer. Wikipedia won Claremont's nightlife itself formed an important part of the context. The district was not simply a backdrop, it was the mechanism through which the offender appears to have found access. Venues like Club Bayview and the Continental Hotel became woven into the story because they were places where young adults arrived in groups, drank, danced, moved between friends, then drifted back out into the night in looser formations than the ones in which they had entered. A group of 5 might become a group of 3 and then 2 and then one person left standing near the curb, handbag over one shoulder, scanning for headlights. That slow unraveling of company into solitude is one of the most unsettling textures of the case. Nothing dramatic marks it, no alarm sounds. No one announces that a person has just become vulnerable. The shift is almost invisible. A friend thinks she has gone with someone else. Another assumes a taxi has already been found. Someone decides not to worry until morning. In retrospect, these gaps feel enormous, but in real time they are measured in minutes and misunderstandings. Jane Rimmer was last seen on security footage outside the Continental Hotel shortly after midnight on the 9th of June 1996. and Chura Glennon was later seen interacting with an unidentified light-colored vehicle before she vanished in March 1997. Wikipedia 1. The women at the center of the case were not symbols when they stepped into those nights. They were not case files. They were young women living ordinary, full, forward-moving lives. Sarah Spires was 18, at the edge of adulthood, with all the brightness and incompleteness that age carries. Jean Rimmer was 23, older, established enough to be building her own adult identity, but still young enough that life had not yet settled into anything permanent. Chura Glennon was 27, a lawyer, intelligent and accomplished. A woman whose friends and family would have known her not through headlines, but through the thousands of private details that make up a person's real existence. The way she laughed, the way she organized a day, the way she answered the phone, the kind of silences she kept. The public learns names and ages, families lose entire worlds. That is another essential part of the context. The case did not wound Perth in the abstract, it cut into households. Bedrooms remained as they had been left, clothing stayed in wardrobes, birthdays arrived with empty chairs. Parents and siblings were forced into the unnatural position of becoming custodians not only of memory, but of uncertainty. Sarah Spires remains missing to this day, while Jean Rimmer's body was found on the 3rd of August 1996 in Bushland near Wellard, and Chura Glennon's body was found on the 3rd of April 1997 near Eglinton. Wikipedia 1. Geography deepened the terror. The women vanished from a lively suburban entertainment strip, yet the bodies that were found were discovered far from that social brightness, in Scrub and Bushland, places marked by distance, silence, and the indifferent patience of the natural world. That contrast mattered. It suggested movement, control, and confidence. It hinted that the offender was comfortable enough to take victims from one environment and place them in another, converting public sociability into private isolation with terrifying ease. Perth residents would have felt that shift in their bones. The city itself suddenly seemed connected by hidden roots of menace. Streets once associated with familiar nightlife now seemed to lead invisibly outward into wasteland, darkness, and disposal. The murders did not only contaminate Claremont, they cast a shadow over the roads leaving it, over the edges of the city, over every lonely stretch of scrub that might conceal what loved ones most feared. When bodies are discovered in such places, the landscape itself becomes implicated. Bush tracks, roadside scrub, and empty expanses cease to be neutral scenery. They become evidence of how completely a victim was taken away from the life she had been living only hours earlier. Wikipedia 1. The police response also became part of the wider setting. As public pressure mounted, the investigation grew to enormous size and complexity, becoming one of Western Australia's biggest, longest, and most expensive murder inquiries. That scale was not merely bureaucratic. It reflected the case's hold on the community. Thousands of people were scrutinized. Rumors multiplied. Men who worked in occupations connected to late-night transport or mobility fell under particular suspicion. Taxi drivers, especially, came under intense police attention because the victims had last been seen in situations where they may have intended to use taxis to get home. The image of the taxi queue, once mundane, now began to feel sinister in a way no one had expected. According to summaries of the investigation, police carried out a major fingerprint and DNA testing exercise involving large numbers of licensed taxi drivers in Western Australia as they tried to narrow the field. Wikipedia 1, and as with many long investigations, the passage of time did not calm the case. It changed its texture. In the beginning there was urgent hope. Find the missing woman, identify the vehicle, follow the witness, make the arrest. Then, as days became weeks and weeks became years, urgency hardened into obsession. Claremont ceased to be just an active investigation and became a civic wound. Generations in Perth grew up hearing the case name with the same grim familiarity attached to a local legend. except there was nothing legendary about the damage. The case remained alive through anniversaries, renewed searches, media reports, theories, public appeals, and the quiet entrance of grieving families. There were false paths and major suspects who never led to conviction. Lance Williams, once publicly treated as a prime suspect after police surveillance, was eventually ruled out. Other names circulated in public speculation. Each turn raised hope and then drained it again. That long emotional attrition forms part of the context too. A city can survive a mystery for a while. It is much harder to live inside one for decades. Wikipedia won the eventual arrest of Bradley Robert Edwards in December 2016 did not erase those decades, it only cast them in a harsher light. By then, the case had already transformed Perth's cultural memory. It had altered how women thought about getting home. It had influenced policing, forensic expectations, and media practices. It had become a reference point for fear itself. Edwards was later convicted in 2020 of the murders of Jane Rimmer and Chura Glennon and sentenced to life imprisonment with a non-parole period of 40 years, but acquitted of Sarah Spires' murder, whose remains have never been found. Wikipedia won, yet even that legal outcome does not fully define the Claremont story. The true context is larger than court procedure. It is the mood of Perth before the disappearances and after them. It is the way a city's confidence can be punctured not by spectacular chaos, but by repeated disappearances that expose how much danger can fit inside the ordinary. It is the way an affluent suburb can become synonymous with dread. It is the sound of nightclub music fading behind a closing door while, out on the pavement, someone waits alone believing she is still in the safe part of the night. It is the way friends replay the evening afterward, trying to locate the instant when routine slid into catastrophe. It is the silence in parents' houses before dawn. It is the growing realization among women across the city that safety had never been as solid as it looked beneath electric light. That is the background against which the Claremont case unfolded, not simply a sequence of crimes, but the collapse of a shared assumption. Before 1996, Claremont meant affluence, nightlife, and suburban ease. After the vanishings of Sarah Spires, Jane Rimmer, and Chura Glennon, it meant something else as well. It meant absence. It meant unfinished journeys. It meant that in one of Perth's brightest social districts, the space between the last dance and the trip home had become a hunting ground, and an entire city had been forced to look into that darkness and admit that it had been there all along. Before there were police exhibits, courtroom arguments, grainy surveillance frames, and the hard, cold language of a murder brief, there were 3 young women living ordinary lives with the kind of momentum that makes loss feel almost impossible to look at directly. That is the first truth that has to be restored whenever the Claremont case is told. Sarah Spires was not born to become a missing person poster in a phone box. Jane Rimmer was not meant to be remembered only as a woman captured in the last seconds of black and white footage outside a hotel. Chura Glennon was not put into this world to be reduced to a headline about fear in the western suburbs. They were daughters, sisters, friends, women with work to go to, plans already forming. Habits so familiar to the people who loved them that those habits became the very first proof that something was terribly wrong when each of them failed to